Hello there, and welcome to my quick guide on how to deal with some of the more challenging basic enemies in Skul the Hero Slayer. Now quickly, before we jump into it and take a look at how to deal with some of these nasties, I want to bring your attention to the skill tree that the witch provides for you, and specifically point out Flexible Spine. A lot of people who have trouble dealing with some of the enemies maybe aren't aware that Flexible Spine gives you invincibility on your roll. Starting off in Skul, your dash or roll, whatever you want to call it, doesn't have invincibility frames, which means if you try and dash through a projectile or through an enemy's attack at the right timing, you will still take damage. Flexible Spine, however, gives it true invincibility. So if you're familiar with the dodge from a Dark Souls game or any other invincibility roll, this is what you think it is, this is what will help give you that effect. The other perks in the tree are useful for sure, and you definitely want to fill this out as quickly as you can. Just do runs, die, do more runs, die, fill this out over time. But Flexible Spine, in my opinion, will help you avoid damage the most. Now in Act 1 there are only actually 2 enemies I'm going to cover here because I feel the rest are pretty self-explanatory in how to deal with them. The first one is Mr. Tree here, as you can see. Now the tree only has 2 attacks. The first one, his face puffs up and he shoots out balls. And as you saw, you can deal with this attack just by standing off to the side of him. The trajectory of the attack is always exactly the same, meaning that you can very easily avoid them. The second attack that he does, he raises his arms up into the air and pounds the ground. You can quite simply jump up to avoid this attack. Pretty easy enemy. Don't let him get the better of you. Keep an eye on his animations. And when he tells you, hey, I'm going to attack, avoid appropriately. Let me introduce you to the second enemy of Act 1 that seems to give people a decent amount of trouble. I'm mainly pointing him out here because there is a variant of him in Act 2 that definitely does give people trouble. Now, he only has 2 attacks. Once again, most enemies in the game aren't that varied, especially in Act 1. Both of his attacks are very telegraphed and can be avoided fairly simply. If he raises his hammer into the air, move through him. If he puts his shoulder down and looks like he's about to tackle you, chances are he's going to tackle you. You can jump over it, walk through him to the other side, or dash through him if you want to quick dodge it as well. Okay, now moving into Act 2. This is where it gets spicy. Most people seem to have trouble with enemies in this act. And first up we have none other than, if you can see her on the right, the maid. This is probably the most hated enemy in the entire game, and I'm going to try and break down exactly how to deal with her and her little maid spawns as best I can. First and foremost, if she doesn't have maids already summoned, she will do so. As soon as you get in range of her, she will call in backup. The maids will spawn 2 blonde and 1 redhead. The blondes will always dash forward and attempt to hit you with their brooms. The redhead will always jump up and over you and try to throw dinner plates at you. If you are too slow in reacting, the blondes will run out and hit you. Or the plates from the redheads will hit you. However, you may not have known that the blonde maids only have invincibility on their initial dash when they're running towards you. You can, in fact, stand there and allow them to run at you, and then dash away. The tiny redhead maid is a little bit different because she jumps and drops plates on you. You can pretty much get around this by moving underneath her, or run with her and avoid them that way. If you kill off all of the maids, the big maid will summon in more. She also has, as you can see, a bell attack. This bell attack is fairly easy to dodge as long as you're moving. You only really get hit by it if you're standing still. I highly recommend dodging as much as you can to avoid all of this damage. And as you can see, as long as 1 maid is left, like the redhead over here, she won't summon in any more. So it might be a strategy for you to divide and conquer, because I can sit here and beat up this maid all I want, and she won't bring out any more. But say we get rid of the little maid, look at that, she's already bringing out more. Whether you dash, or you walk away, move underneath the other maids, you can deal with these guys. It's just going to take some time and practice getting used to their moveset. Now, we have the second enemy of Act 2 that people seem to have trouble with, and that is the Archer, an upgrade from the archers in the first area. He will line you up with his regular shot and fire arrows towards you, but it is actually his one and only special skill that bothers people. If you move towards him, or attack him, he will jump back with a yellow glow of invincibility, like that, and fire at you. I strongly suggest baiting it, let him do it once, then go in, take care of him afterwards. Just be aware, they will always do it when you get close. They don't want you getting close to them. Third enemy on the list of Act 2 is the big boy upstairs that you can see. An upgrade to the charger from Act 1 that I covered already. His attacks are actually identical to the big charger in Act 1, with one notable difference, the shockwave that comes out of his axe when he brings it down. You really can get around this guy exactly the same as the charger from Act 1. The only difference is he now technically has range on his overhead swing, but you can dash through, or jump over, and deal with him pretty much exactly the same as the charger in Act 1. And the next enemy that gives people difficulty in Act 2, the spear guy. I think this is actually one of the worst ones for people that they don't really talk about. If you stand away from him, he will put his spear down and run at you with it. Fairly simple to avoid, the yellow glow indicates invincibility, so you're not going to stop him once he starts. But like you can see, you can jump over him, or if you time it correctly, dash through him. Bear in mind that dashing through him is something you're only going to get away with if you have a skull like the Djinn that allows you to teleport rather than move straight along, or if you have the trait that I showed you at the beginning that gives your roll invincibility. The second attack that he does is this overhead swing that clips people. It is very fast. It does not have invincibility, but it has a humongous hitbox, and tends to hit people if this guy is on a lower floor than you. Right, next enemy I'm not really convinced is a big problem, but I'll point out anyway. This guy here that fires off the large balls, the actual balls themselves aren't properly active until they're launched, so you can stand in the way until the last second. I suggest just nuking him at the very start, get around the ball, wait for him to shoot one, get rid of him afterwards. Now when rooms start to become a little complicated like this, where you have lots of enemies in the way, take your time. Maybe move away, separate the enemies, make things a little bit easier. Keep an eye on what enemies are doing. And most definitely do not get too caught up mashing the attack button. Feel free to attack once and stop and reposition yourself if you need to, if your enemy is about to do an attack that you know you cannot stop. And for goodness sake, in rooms like this, if you see this totem, specifically this one, it's an armor totem, but it also means that you cannot interrupt enemies that are attacking. It doesn't matter if they're big guys or little guys. This thing is probably the most annoying totem in the entire game. Destroy this thing ASAP. It's also positioning like this that spear guys, like the one hidden below, is going to hit you. Be aware of where you're standing and whether or not the spear guy is going to reach. Okay, moving on to Act 3, this is where stuff gets a little bit crazy bread. The gimmick with a lot of stuff in Act 3 is that just about everything explodes, so be very mindful of little exclamation marks that show up to indicate they're about to blow. As shown there. If an enemy glows like this, they're about to blow up, but as you may have seen, fun fact, the enemy explosions can hurt each other. So it's not necessarily a bad idea to bunch some enemies up and let them blow each other up. Now these alchemist looking dudes, they throw potions. The potions have no tracking whatsoever. They will always be thrown at wherever you're standing at the time that they're thrown. Very easy attack to avoid. The main problem with the alchemists is if you're in the middle of a fight and you're too distracted. Now we have a favorite, the large ogre. The large ogre has one attack. He does 3 big slams with his club. The first 2 attacks always go in the direction that he was facing, but the third attack, he will turn around and face wherever you are, whether you're behind him or not. So for dealing with him, you can dash through him, and then back through him, or jump, mind you, if you want to jump instead. But you can bait his attacks, get a cheeky hit, move through, stay close, keep an eye on when his club goes up over his head, and then be prepared to dash through, and be mindful, all 3 hits are going to happen, and as you saw, he does explode after he dies. Now I've just deliberately allowed this enemy, which most of you might be familiar with, and some of you never want to see ever. This enemy is actually summoned by allowing cultists to finish a ritual that happens. If you've gotten up to Act 3, chances are you may have seen this ritual happening already. He has a couple of attacks that are being shown off in the background as I speak, If you are away from him, he will spawn shards that explode on you. He has an attack where he will charge forward towards you. He has an attack where he places a crystal on the ground from a range that explodes, as you can see happening on screen now. He has an attack where he will lower his mouth to the ground and fire off exploding blasts. Honestly, this enemy is one of the worst things to have to deal with in Act 3, and I strongly suggest just not dealing with him at all by stopping the summon before it happens. If you do have to deal with him though, I suggest, if you're not confident in dealing with his moveset, bait him into an attack, run away, get your hits where you can, like you see me do here. Otherwise, the situation can and most likely will get a little bit messy. And as a demonstration down here, we have the ritual site. The two alchemists flicking through books are the ones that you're looking to get rid of before they have a chance to finish the ritual. Once you engage them, they'll begin channeling this portal. Getting rid of one of them is not enough. As I will demonstrate, they're going to get dragged into the middle of the portal, and oh no, the big guy has been summoned. We now have to deal with him. Once you've dealt with the big guy, thank your lucky stars that you didn't die. I strongly suggest saving things like your quintessence for dealing with situations like this. Save some of your abilities, save skull swaps, nuke these ritual sites as soon as you see them, get rid of those cultists. Now the next enemy I want to talk about is this tree guy right here, corrupted by the Dark Quartz. He's very similar to the tree in Act 1 that summons the thorns on the ground, indicated by the red glow beneath you. Simply move out of the way of that. If you've gotten up to Act 3, chances are you already know how to deal with this. The difference with this guy is that when you get close to him, he becomes very unhappy and shows off his prickly nature. He will glow white for a moment, indicating he's about to attack, and then spike out and poke you. He can be temporarily stun-locked by hitting him, but when he glows, move out of the way. Next up on the list to discuss is this large alchemist here. Very dangerous enemy indeed, and I definitely suggest prioritizing him and getting rid of him as soon as you see him. He will summon, only for a single attack though, similar to the alchemist skull that we can use, the big dark quartz monster abomination that normally gets summoned by the other cultists. He also throws vials, as seen here. If he throws red vials, the skulls will be explodey and come after you. Jump, dodge, get away. The quartz monster that he spawns will do different attacks. He will do a big explosion AoE like you just saw there. He can also shoot a purple ball in front of him. In addition to the red vials that he throws, which I'm not going to lie, this one here is only throwing red vials, they can also throw green vials, which release the normal skulls. Definitely easy to deal with, but at the same time, like I said, best just to get rid of these guys before they become a problem. Now, this particular alchemist, as you can see, is throwing the green vials that summon the little spirits. His version of the Dark Quartz monster also shoots a purple orb 4 that travels a short distance and then explodes. Now, what's to be mindful of is that when it explodes, it'll shoot off in separate directions. As you can see there. The trajectory is always the same. It is very similar to the tree enemy in Act 1, the large tree that I covered already that shoots out orbs. And now for some last minute final tips that I'm not sure people are aware of. When you start your run and you talk to the fox, you can talk to him a second time, pay 10 dark quartz, and he'll give you a second skull as well. You can pick both of these up and use them in your run. Perfectly fine. The same thing goes for the ogre guy over here who gives you an item. The first item is free, the second item costs 10 quartz. A nice way to start your run. Take 2 items. Finally, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to work on your perk tree here and fill these out. Definitely work towards the last 2 columns over here. Getting flexible spine, calcium injection, ancient alchemy, and then finally exoskeleton reinforcement and reassemble. Something else that I'll throw in very quickly before I wrap this up is being able to tell the difference between physical damage and magical damage. All physical damage shows up as orange or yellow numbers. Orange is just a non-crit, yellow as if it crit, like that 10 right there. However, magical damage will show up as a blue number, as you can see whenever my werewolf is doing his leap. Or when Little Skull swaps in and throws his skull toss. The number that shows up is blue, that is a magic damage attack. You'll find that a lot of the special abilities and skills are magic attack, and just about every Skull's basic swinging, except for a few rare examples like the Alchemist and the Archmage, have magic attacks. If you have trouble remembering which color belongs to which type of damage, just remember that on the item descriptions, if it's physical damage, it'll actually be colored orange, and if it's magical damage, it'll be colored blue. Just as a nice reminder so that you can tell what you're actually powering up with the items that you're using. This way you know that if the skull you're using's most powerful attacks or most often used attacks are physical or magical, you can plan your items out accordingly and get the best out of it. And now before wrapping up, my final tip before closing the video, you can stand on the broken chandeliers. Definitely the best tip of the entire video for sure. But that's going to be it. I hope this covered everything that people wanted enough, and gives you some insight into how to deal with some of these more difficult enemies throughout your run during Skul, and get rid of enemies a bit more methodically. If there are some enemies that you're still just not getting down the patterns for, you're just not able to avoid, don't worry, there's no penalty for losing runs. I recommend that you find enemies like that, don't even kill them. Get rid of everything else on the screen, leave the enemy that you're having a hard time with on the screen, and just practice dodging its attacks, practice avoiding its attacks. Don't even worry about rushing to get rid of it, practice on it, pretend it's a training dummy, pretend that you're there just to learn. And finally, a big thank you to you for watching this. I sincerely do hope that it has helped at least someone out there who was having trouble understanding some of these enemies. If you did enjoy and you're interested in more Skul content, I have a whole bunch of videos up already, and I'm sure that by watching through you'll be able to see how I deal with some of these situations in my own runs. Thank you for stopping by, good luck in your runs, have a good one.